Welcome tonight to the Toronto Debating Society. It's November 8th, 2011. It is the regular parliamentary debate. The resolution for tonight is movies are better than books. The Prime Minister for tonight is going to be Parampreet Singh, and he will speak to us for 7 minutes. Please welcome the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the resolution before us tonight is movies are better than books. We, the government, would like to define the terms as following. Movies, a story or event recorded by a camera as a set of moving images and shown in a theater or on television or viewed on an electronic screen. Books, a written or printed work of fiction or nonfiction. Better, and for the definition of better, we're going to turn to one of the options Webster's gave us, which is more advantageous. So we believe movies are better, much better than books. They are more advantageous. We, the government, will show that movies are more natural to our mental processes. This makes them easier to experience and easier to absorb. Secondly, we will show movies take less of our precious time. They're easier to complete and finish. And thirdly, movies are more social than books. For our first point, movies are more natural. The human species did not evolve naturally to read. Reading has to be taught. It is a complex task in which we have to take these scribbles on pieces of paper, written with pen or typed out, convert them into words, and then into concepts, and then process them. In contrast, we are biologically designed to watch and listen. A human fetus in its mother's womb already begins to hear. And when it is born, it immediately begins the process of seeing. We are literally born to watch and hear. Our brains are developed to support our senses. Almost half of our brain is used for the sense of sight, and a good portion for the sense of hearing. If we're only using 10% of the brain, it's probably because we're just reading and not watching and hearing. Our brains are also keyed in for things like shapes and colors and movements and facial features. All these are arrangements that movies are a perfect delivery mechanism for, and they deliver it directly to us. That's why it's easier for movies, and they're more natural to us, and therefore more advantageous and better. Our deep biology, because we love to watch and hear, it also elicits a more natural response in us when we watch a movie. We feel them in our gut. We feel them viscerally. Romances, comedies, horrors, all these genres. The reason they're so popular is because we actually feel things biologically when we experience movies. We react to them. And that's why they're also better. Our brains are subconsciously trained to respond to these auditory and visual information coming from our screens. That's why actors, they're able to sway us. They're able to move our emotions by a look or a movement or a well-spoken word. We respond easily. Our brains don't need to do that onerous, complicated task of having to convert these scratches into words, and then into concepts. In fact, we don't even need words to enjoy a movie. In the origins of film, there were no words. There was only music, and movies were one of the most popular entertainment forms across the world. When's the last time you read a book of blank pages? Nobody does that. Movies are better. Everyone can enjoy movies. Now, a defense of books often will turn to the joy of words and the fact that books help build vocabulary. It's true, they do. But movies help you build so much other options for your senses. Things words cannot convey. Movies are a rich source of visual and auditory information. Just think of all the Oscar categories. Set design, costumes, sound editing, music, and of course, screenwriting. Let's not forget, movies actually do have words in them. They're just easier to hear and absorb. I want to point out that it's common knowledge that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And every second of a movie has 24 still pictures in it. That means every 5 seconds, we're consuming a 500-page book by just watching a movie. On pure statistics alone, a 1.5-hour movie is 900 times better than a book. This brings me to the point that movies are faster to enjoy than books. A movie is easily completed in one sitting. And just to be super efficient, we're encouraged to eat while doing a movie or watching a movie. That's 2 tasks done at the same time. All I have to say is that movies are wonderful. Our last point, my colleague will expand on this a little bit. Movies are more social. The greatest date of all, dinner and a movie. It's the standard, and that's what 2 eligible lovers choose. Who ever heard of dinner and a book? That's so isolating. No one would choose to go there. So this is why I recommend that we choose movies. Clearly, they're more natural, they're faster, they're more social, and we feel movies are better than books. Please vote.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Now, Leader of the Opposition will have an opportunity to speak to us for 7 minutes as well. Please welcome David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when I looked at the definitions tonight by email, that that better would be defined as more advantageous, it left me scratching my head, because advantageous to some end, to some object. I mean, advantageous would mean to give you an advantage, to give you an edge, but toward what aim? And I couldn't find it. I couldn't come to grips with that at all. And having heard the government side of the issue, I am no further in the clear on the matter, so I'm still a little bit perplexed. We have been told that movies are natural to our mental processes. Well, that depends on whose mental processes we're talking about. In many ways, this is a debate about whether or not the activity of viewing is any more pleasurable than the activity of reading. And depending on the clientele that we're talking about, that point can go either way. For example, if we were to take a poll of the people in this room, we would say that reading was the most natural thing in the world to us. We lament the fact that we cannot find the time to read the things that we like. Our bedside tables are stacked high with books that we can't get around to. I never, rarely anyway, hear people say, I can't get a chance to go to all the movies that I would like to. I never hear that. Book clubs abound. People meet to talk about books. I don't know of any movie clubs. People don't meet to talk about movies. The Prime Minister went on to say that there is no appeal to our minds in print, that it is in images. He uses some very graphic language, and I commend him on that. He spoke about the visceral nature of the movies, the immediacy, the fact that the blood and guts are up there for all to see, and we're swept along with this. But however, nothing to my mind is more natural than forming the images in my own mind. When we read, we create a movie and run it through our own mind. When Marshall McLuhan spoke about print, he called it a hot medium. And by that he meant that it necessitated an interactive process. A reader is somebody who is in an interactive process with a writer. You are actually participating together in a dance of meaning that you cannot possibly get in movies. Books are easily remembered because of that, because of what you, the reader, put into them. Movies, like television, they simply wash right over you. We can't remember weeks later that we'd seen a movie. Books also have that wonderful capacity that no movie can have, and that is they make the appeal, the aesthetic appeal to the mind. The wonderful descriptive passages of the whale in Moby Dick, for example, or the utter gloom in the Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the macabre. No movie is able to do that. There's an appeal to the senses, to meaning that stays with us. There's an aftertaste to a book that no movie can possibly produce whatsoever. He spoke about time. Well, movies save us time. Well, I suppose Reader's Digest condensed books saves us time, but who would go that route? I mean, we do not go to a movie to see a story that we haven't got time to read. He speaks about the social aspect. Movies are no more social than anything else, for God's sakes. I mean, you go and you sit next to a person. Certainly there's some communication afterwards, but for those 2 hours, you may as well be alone. Movies can't match the social potential of books that we can give books, for example, from the earliest ages, nursery rhymes, to our children, and continue to meet with them in family activities over the next couple of generations, continuing to give them books. Books bring people together. These are the legends. These are the things we have grown up with. In many ways, they are the means by which an entire culture is transmitted. Books bring all of these things to us. Movies are a pale imitation of that. So there is an immediacy, yes, to movies, but for how long? I mean, it washes over us, it's immediately forgotten. So in no way does the government's arguments stand up whatsoever when we consider the wonderful feeling, the aesthetic feeling that we get from the passages of books. They stay with us. They give us an aftertaste. Here's an example. John Huston, the famed Hollywood director, filmed James Joyce's story, The Day. And it's a wonderful story. And the movie was quite good, no doubt about it. But the last couple of scenes in that movie shows the snow falling over a graveyard in Ireland. And the scene is set in 1904, and there's a heavy weight of Catholic oppression and the sense of sadness of what might have been of lives half lived. Life, yes, but not living. And here's the way the book ends. And he says, yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain and the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen, and further westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. And here it is, the mutinous Shannon waves. The boy had drowned, and they were mourning the death. But they were mourning the death that they had half lived, what might have been. And Joyce brings that down, and I read that 40 years ago, and that page, I went to the, immediately to the internet and found that page tonight. I've never had that kind of an experience with a movie. So for sheer maturity of feeling, for sheer sustenance and nourishment for the soul, the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now it's going to be followed by the seconder of the government. He's going to speak to us for 5 minutes. Please welcome David. Adrian.
Mr. Speaker, will you set the clock right? I think it's...
Ladies and gentlemen, movies are better than books because they're more natural, they require less attention, they stimulate visual and audio sense, they are more social and faster. I'm going to rebut the opposition's arguments, then I'll give 3 points, actually 4 points, as to why movies are better than books. I know that the opposition leader was talking about the advantages, but I think the way we define some of these is that it is in the fact that they are more social, more natural, require less attention, stimulate visual appeal, and they're more easier. Okay. He also talked about reading a book before you go to bed, but I think that shows you know how boring books can be, because you read a book in bed and then you fall asleep because it's boring. It puts you to sleep. And book clubs, yeah, there are book clubs and book events. There are many events people go to. They go as a group and they watch a movie and they go out to a bar or something afterwards and they sit and they talk and they chat about the movie. Okay, now I'm going to give you some new arguments, 4 points as to why movies are better than books. Movies are better than books for social reasons in 3 ways. The first way is that we watch movies with friends. You know, you after school, on the weekends, or with, after work, you hang out with a couple of friends and you watch a movie and you enjoy it and you get a social pleasure out of it. The second way is to dating. Like you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you go to a movie or drive in and you make out in the back seat and you get a real social experience out of it.
That appealed to you.
The third way is to watching movies at home. So you go to a bookstore or a video store, and you rent the movie and you watch it at home, or you turn on the TV set and there's that made-for-TV movie that you really like, and you sit at home and you watch it and you get pleasure out of it too. Many times you have friends there and it becomes a real social experience that way. Okay. My second argument is that people as students, we avoid trying to read books in school. Students, when they're given a book to read, they try to do everything they can to avoid books. So they'll go to the bookstore, like Cole's bookstore, and they'll buy the Cole's notes and they read the short edition, and then they'll avoid it. Some will go to the library or whatever and they get the cassette tape, and they'll listen to that, and then they avoid it. The third way they also do is they actually go and they get a movie copy of the book and watch the video instead of the book, because they find it much easier to follow and much easier to get a sense of. My third argument is that movies are not banned, that books are banned. Many times you'll go to a bookstore or library and you'll look for a book that you like or that you have interest in, and you'll try to find the book and they may not have it because the book is banned. With movies, you don't have to worry about that because the movies are always available and you can always see it. Some may not like it or not think that people should watch it, but you'll always have access to it. My fourth and final point is that watching movies can be quicker than books. A movie, for instance, happens in one sitting. A book, it'll take you many sittings, many times to read a book. It may take you many hours to read a whole novel or a book, whereas a movie would take you about 2 hours to do it. And many times a book in days or months it takes to do it, as opposed to one sitting. please vote for the motion.
Thank you, Adrian. Now, finally, this is going to be concluded by the seconder of the opposition, Alfons.
Good evening. The government has raised some interesting points. I will hopefully explain clearly to you why they are not that relevant. The points that the government has raised is that movies are more natural, they take less time, and they are more social. My colleagues are wrong in assuming that an experience of having a story conveyed to you is something to get through quickly. This is something that should be savored and enjoyed. Movies are useful in the fact that they can be gotten through quickly, but if you really enjoy the story and you really connect with the story, do you want it to end quickly? I think that books are much better or they're much better for people who want to savor the experience. They make a point of movies being a more natural means for us to absorb the information in the story. That may be true for a child. Presumably, as we become adults, we become more evolved and our skill level in all aspects goes up. And it takes maturity, and it takes a raised level of consciousness to be able to get a superior experience, which I think books provide, from words, as opposed to absorbing them like a child by seeing lights and motion and loud sounds. They talk about the social aspects of movies as opposed to books. In this respect, I would have to agree with them. It is a less social activity to read, but because it is less social, it allows greater immersion in the story. And isn't that why we're there? Is to immerse ourselves in the experience. I think reading, by intentionally being a less social activity, is a superior way to have the story conveyed to us, or to absorb it. In addition to the points that I have hopefully refuted that the government has brought up, some additional advantages of books are that no electronic devices are needed to have the story conveyed to us, other than perhaps a reading light. And they can be enjoyed in many places that movies can't. Waiting for a bus, on a plane, many places where it's much more difficult. It's possible to enjoy movies on a laptop or something, but it's a lot less cumbersome to have the experience of the book. It's also easier to start and stop if we're interrupted for whatever reason. It's easier to start and stop a book than it is to start and stop a movie, whether in fact you're watching it at home or it's impossible to start and stop the movie if you're at a movie theater. The movies played on devices, like on a laptop or on a television, are bothersome or intrusive to the people who are not involved in watching them. Reading a book is not intrusive. You can be part of a room full of people you can enjoy a book without bothering anybody else there. You're still getting the full experience of it, but you're not bothering anybody else in the room with your activity. And lastly, books actively engage you and your mind and all of your senses because you're getting the complete immersion. When you're watching a movie, you are passively viewing it. So I think it's a much more engaging experience reading a book.
Thank you, Alfons. Now I'm going to ask the leader of the opposition, David, to summarize his position and show of support for against the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By analogy with the seconder for the government, he would seem to suggest that a meal at McDonald's is better, more satisfying than a long leisurely meal in a good family restaurant, just on the sheer grounds that it's faster. If there's anything in this life that we want to get away from, these people with some maturity of taste, is the idea that everything has to be done in a hurry. Look at the slow food movement, for example, trying to reinstate the traditions of leisurely eating, of family meals. They reinstated the point that movies are social. Well, listen to the example. You go out with your buddies, you go to the movies, you go to a pub afterwards. In that 2 hours in that movie house, you are as isolated as a Trappist monk in a cell. You have far more interaction with sitting down with your loved one in an evening at home with both of you reading. You know, there's at least some kind of a sense of comfort. And the fact also that books, as we mentioned earlier, can convey so much that movies can't. They can't convey the beauty. They can convey, for example, a state of mind. You know, what goes through somebody's mind. How do you put that on the movie screen where it's everything in a book, in a novel? And look at the big range that the books give us. Look at the histories, the biographies, the animal stories, the science fiction. Look at the mess that the movies have made of science fiction. The attack of the alien tomatoes, for example. This is not any kind of a service to conveying human experience and human aspirations. The movies cannot hold a patch to the book when it comes to that full range in all its majesty and glory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now I will ask the Prime Minister, Parampreet, to summarize his position. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to clarify a definition issue before I begin, we defined better as more advantageous, and by that it meant movies have greater advantages over books. And that was what the definition was, and both my colleague and the opposition, those are the cases we've been presenting. So just in case there's any confusion, we listed the advantages and why we feel they're better. Movies are more natural to process. Our opposition has agreed with that. No one has to teach us to see and hear. We do it naturally. We're built for it. Movies are more social than books because most of the time we do not get together with other people to read a book. A book is done in isolation. But we don't need movie clubs because going out to a movie is a movie club. People do it every week. And it's a regular thing that's done. And yes, movies are faster to experience than books. But that's because we get all the goodness brought together in a short time frame and given to us. Even with books that are made into movies, we enjoy it because all the goodness of those books is presented in an hour and a half, rather than being prolonged word after word after word over weeks and days. We feel, as the government, that these qualities of movies are great advantages, and that's why they are better. And I shall leave you with a quote from the great Mark Twain, who said, "A classic is a book that everyone wants to have read, but no one wants to read. They'd rather see the movie." Thank you. Vote for movies are better than books.
I knew that.
Thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderful debate. Now we come to the final part of the debate. It's adjudication. Please welcome Gerry.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to leave the first remarks to Jim. He's going to give you the big picture, and then I'll get into some nitty-gritty and talk about individual performances, things you did good, things you did bad, things you can improve on. Mr. Smith?
Things you did good, things you did
Yeah,
not so good. Things that were nearly as good as the bits that
Just
were
get
good.
into it.
So, great debate. It was really well set up by the government. Great arguments that could be opposed, and the opposition actually opposed them. There was a lot of good arguments and good content to prove the arguments. Unfortunately, the PM spent a lot of his time proving one argument. So the government set it up. It had all the setup for a good debate, and it turned into that because 1.1, point 2, point 3, exactly what us as adjudicators are looking for, so we can follow it, and it's much easier for everyone involved to identify what it is that these guys are pushing for and these guys are pushing against. There's also some good additional bits from the member of government, and a lot of additional bits from the member of the opposition. So basically the concept of the debate worked out really well. There was a whole pile of stuff there that everyone could get their teeth into and did. And apart from a few things about timings and not quite getting into some of the points that were raised on this side, some of the points that were raised on that side, it really did work out very well as a great debate. Is that enough? Or I got lots, but that's fine.
All right, so as Jim said, overall was really good. I thought the definition was given out very clearly, very, very easy to understand. The Prime Minister laid out his 3 arguments, told us in advance what they were going to be, and then he started on argument number 1. And he kept going on number 1, and he kept going, and he kept going. 5 minutes on argument number 1. 20 seconds on talking about time, 40 seconds about the social aspect. So that could be more evenly distributed because we're trying to give some marks for each argument. It's hard to give marks for 20 seconds of an argument. So that's something that, certainly argument number 1 was well constructed and talked in and out, but really more had to be given to the other 2 arguments. David came in next as the leader of the opposition and offered a rebuttal for each of the 3 arguments of the Prime Minister, and I thought he did a reasonable job on each of those. And then he added, it was a little bit unclear what your arguments were. They were in amongst the rebuttals, I believe. But I sort of circled book clubs as being an argument, a positive argument, and the whole idea of the nursery rhymes. But I think it would be better to maybe separate them, easier for adjudicators to give points when here are the rebuttals, here are my own arguments. Next was Adrian, very well organized, came up with I'm going to do this, I'm going to do 3 points for rebuttal, I'm going to do 4 arguments, and then you got right into it. I would suggest that your rebuttals, you need to spend a little more time on. Each rebut, you said, I'm going to rebut this, and you gave about 10, 15 seconds to each rebuttal. And they need to be more fleshed out and really work at them Okay, so a little bit longer, but very, very well organized. And then you came out with some of your arguments. You talked about movies at home, you talked about students and Cole's notes, books being banned, movies not so much. I thought they were very good arguments, so really well done. And then our final speaker was Alfons, and again, very, very well organized. 2 rebuttals, very clear, savored and enjoyed over time, less social, greater immersion with books. And then you came up with this mass of points, which was great, and like you say, you didn't even get to them all. Some really, really good points. No electronics needed. A book can be read anywhere. You can start and stop a book anytime. The books are less intrusive to other people. All really, really good points. One comment that I would have, don't keep looking at your opposition. There's your audience. They're not even there. They're there, but that's where your focus should be. But excellent. And you, sir, were the best debater. The score was 53.5 for the opposition and 40 for the government.
Wow.
Thank you. Do we have results of the debate?
We do, Mr. Speaker, and the audience voted in line with the adjudicators, so 7 for the opposition, 2 for the government tonight. Books win.
Thank you very much. So this will conclude the debate for tonight.